Congressional Republicans have decided to block a bill that would prevent price gouging at the pump, or at least to allow the government to go after price gougers. So now, this is amid surging gas prices higher than they've ever been in quite some time, maybe even record highs. Though I do remember seeing it high, a little bit higher than this before. Anyway, you have Republican Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers. Now, she is the ranking Republican of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. She had joined with others in her party to oppose legislation, or should say to oppose H.R. 7688. So that legislation would give the Federal Trade Commission power to go after oil companies if the government can prove that they're price gouging. They're inflating the price of gasoline, which certainly they seem to be. And so, look, I understand that there's a situation in Ukraine, but as far as energy here in America, we only get about 8% of our oil from Russia. So that's not really the cause of the inflation of gas to such a high extreme level. I had a thought that, a couple of days ago, well, I had many thoughts, but I was just thinking, like, seeing the gas is like, you ever notice how it goes up under Democrats and goes down under Republicans? Now, some of you, if you're a conservative, you could point out, well, obviously it's because the Democrats, they're the socialists that hate government, or that hate private industry and hate coal and gas and oil. No, that's not necessarily it. Today's Democratic Party loves the oil industry. Yes, they talk about climate change. Oh, existential threat. But then they decide not to do anything about it. And so talk is cheap. And when you look at the amount of donations coming from oil and gas to Democrats, for example, Henry Cuellar gets a ton of money from oil and gas. Joe Manchin is a literal coal baron. And so, I mean, when you look, again, there are a few progressives that are pretty good on environmental issues, except that they don't have any power to do anything about it. And so, yeah, we're kind of stuck there. So now, that said, allowing the government to actually go after price gougers seems like it would be a decent idea. I don't know how much it would help, but even if it helped a little bit, well, that would be great. Now, getting back to the thought that I had, right? Well, now, what if it's on purpose? What if whenever a Democrat gets into office, oil companies go and they talk to their people that they fund in the Republicans, essentially, the Republican Party, and they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to raise gas prices. We're just going to raise gas prices and screw over Democrats. And, of course, any possible environmentalist left-winger that might get into office, and screw them over and make sure that, in the next election, Americans vote for Republicans so that we can continue to get tax breaks, special deals, and of course to fight against environmental policy. I don't know. That's just my conspiracy theory. You could say whether or not I'm crazy for bringing that up, but it feels like something that I can't prove, but it feels true. It feels true. So anyway, now, that said, McMorris Rodgers, she said that making it illegal for oil companies to price gouge would be, quote-unquote, socialism. Something that's done in places like Soviet Russia, not in America. So, no, wait, if preventing price gouging from corporations is socialism, then is price gouging, according to her logic, capitalism? I would say yes. The answer, obviously, yes. And a ranking Republican is saying, yep, absolutely, we prefer it this way. We don't want to do anything about the price of gas. Now, she is now, by the way, calling this legislation the Socialist Energy Price Fixing Act. There's no price fixing in this. Again, there are no price controls in this legislation. at all. It just allows the FTC to look in and to see if companies are indeed inflating the price of gas more than they should be. That's it. No price caps. That's it. It's insane. Now, do you think that okay, so let me ask you another thing. We know the Democrats on this show. We know that they essentially are do nothing, right? They suck at their jobs. Unless, of course, you think that their jobs are sucking up to the donors, in which they're fantastic. Do you think that they would actually pass something that would impact those donors? I don't think so. I don't think they'd ever pass price caps. I don't think they would even try. And so even this idea to punish the price gougers, potentially, has been poo-pooed by members of the party itself. In fact, the idea to use legislation to punish price gouging was called nonsense by former President Obama's chair of Council of Economic Advisors. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg also on Sunday played dumb about this legislation. Again, Secretary of Transportation. I'm not familiar with all the details of that legislation, Buttigieg says on CBS Face the Nation. But what I can tell you from an administration perspective is that there's guidance going out to crack down on price gouging where we see it. Guidance, everybody. They've got guidance. Is that a strongly worded letter from the Democrats? Because we see how far that goes. No, look, this is never going to pass the Senate. It would likely pass the House if it ever got out of committee, which it might. They're going back and they're saying that they're going to beef it up. Oh, okay. Well, that's still not going to prevent Republicans from blocking it. But all right, if it actually does get out on the floor, it'll get passed by the House, but it's never going to get past the Senate. Why? Because you got to clear a filibuster, 60 votes. Democrats refuse to get rid of the filibuster, and so it's never going to pass. At the end of the day, none of this is, nobody's going to do a goddamn thing about gas prices. And besides, look, corporate Democrats also would join with Republicans to, for some reason, they'll come up with a reason to tank the legislation. And again, there's no question, or I'm sorry, there's no assurance that this bill would even reduce gas prices significantly. And you can bet that if there is a version of this that does go through Congress, it's probably not going to do a whole lot. And the reason that, by the way, these gas companies, fossil fuel companies, have raised their prices is because they're trying to recoup profits that they had lost during the pandemic when people were not driving. So, now, that said, I do know what would eventually do something about gas prices, and that would be to get off fossil fuels, period. I mean, and again, I understand that this is going to take quite a long time. We're looking at like a long time for implementation, even assuming you could pass it today. But still, you should do it. Pass a Green New Deal. Get off of old coal, oil, and natural gas. Replace it with renewable energy sources. Double down on public transportation, as well as electric vehicles, charging stations, infrastructure, things like that. Now, of course, I'm not saying that those things are perfect as well. You still have the issues with materials to create batteries, being rare earth materials, things like lithium, and you'd have to find a way to get those things and get a supply of that stuff, or do some technical innovation that allows us to not have to use those types of rare earth energy sources and find it and be able to extract it without exploitation. That's a lot of stuff. That's a pretty tall order, right? And again, the infrastructure involved in doing all of this, these are things that neither party will do. Simple as that. I mean, these problems are huge. Neither side is equipped or politically motivated to do anything about them. And so it's too bold, it's too big for the Democrats, and Republicans are too beholden to the donors to do anything about it. And so, look, we all know this. But what's really, really sad is they cannot even do the bare minimum to even attempt to lower gas prices. They just can't do it. Even legislation like this, that might even help a little bit, immediately gets shut down by Republicans. As socialism, no less, when it is clearly not socialism. It really does kind of illustrate how conservatives really feel about helping average people. They just don't want to. They just don't want to.